The station smelled like recycled air and diplomatic perfume. Cole Beckett stood at his post near the reception hall's east corridor, rifle slung low, eyes doing what they always did, not watching the doors, but watching the bodies that moved through them. Terran Coalition brass filled the room like suits at a funeral nobody wanted to attend. Ambassador Ren Solier was working the center of it, all teeth and handshakes, selling the kind of optimism that only politicians could manufacture on command. The Meridian Arc was neutral ground, a station built in the dead space between systems for exactly this kind of thing, two species circling each other, deciding whether to be friends or problems. Cole didn't care about the politics. He cared about posture, the way a person held their weight when something was wrong inside them. So when the Ilithari delegation entered, he saw it. They came through the far doors in a slow formation, tall and angular, their skin pulling light from somewhere beneath it and pushing it back out in soft waves. Bioluminescence. Cole had read the briefing packet. Ancient species, technologically superior, culturally proud to the point of brittleness. Their bodies glowed, and that glow meant something: health, status, mood. The brighter the Ilithari, the stronger they were. The one in front glowed the brightest, Doyen Caliph, the regent, tall as a loading crane, moving with the slow confidence of someone who had never been rushed in his life. Behind him, advisors and attendants, each radiating that same steady, cool blue light. And then her. Valith Serana, crown heir to the Ilithari dominion. She walked like she owned every room she'd ever entered. Chin lifted, shoulders set in a line that dared anyone to find fault. Her gown moved around her like liquid metal. She was, by any biological standard Cole could reference, stunning. The kind of face that made a person forget their own name and rank, and the fact that she was from a species that considered humans roughly equivalent to clever livestock. But her light was wrong. Cole saw it the way a mechanic hears an engine knock that nobody else catches. The glow beneath her skin flickered, not pulsed, flickered. A tiny stutter, like a bulb with a bad connection. Every few seconds, a micro-dimming that passed so fast a civilian would miss it entirely. Cole did not miss it. He watched her cross the reception hall, watched her greet Solier with the kind of graceful nod that contained an entire culture's worth of superiority. Watched her take a glass of something luminous from an attendant and hold it without drinking. The flicker came again. Her left hand tightened on the glass stem. Nobody else saw it. "Stop staring at the alien princess," Nate Harlow muttered from the post beside him. Nate had the build of a refrigerator, and the survival instincts of a man who'd learned that trouble usually started with his friends doing something stupid. "I'm serious, Cole. You get us reassigned to cargo duty, I will end you." Her light's off. Her light is not your business. He filed it away, the way he filed everything, in the part of his brain that kept lists of symptoms, vital signs, and things that didn't add up. The reception dragged on for 3 hours. Cole stood his post and watched Valith move through the room like a queen on a timer. She spoke to Solier. She spoke to the Terran military attaché. She did not speak to the soldiers standing guard, because soldiers standing guard were furniture, and furniture did not require conversation. At one point, she turned and caught his eyes. It lasted 2 seconds, maybe less. Her gaze was sharp and pale, the color of glacial runoff, and it carried the particular weight of someone who was used to being looked at and had long ago stopped finding it interesting. Cole didn't look away, not out of boldness, out of the same instinct that kept him watching a patient's pupils when everyone else was watching the wound. Something was wrong with her, and his hands wanted to fix it the way they always wanted to fix things, with gauze and pressure, and the stubborn, angry patience that had kept people alive on colony floors, when there was nothing to work with but willpower and clean water. She looked away first, turned back to her conversation. The flicker came again, and this time it lasted a full second. Her neck, her collarbone, the light just gone, like someone had blown out a candle inside her and relit it, a heartbeat too late. The reception ended. The delegations withdrew to their respective quarters. Cole's squad was dismissed to the security barracks. He didn't go to the barracks. He walked the east corridor, the one the Ilithari delegation had used. The station's lighting was dimmed to evening cycle, and the hallway had that hollow, humming quiet that all stations got when the important people were behind closed doors. He almost missed it. A smear on the wall, about shoulder height. Faint, slightly luminous, a pale blue-white residue, like someone had leaned hard against the surface and left something behind. Biological. He'd seen enough wound tracks to know what a body left on a wall when it was struggling to stay vertical. Cole stopped, pulled a field swab from his kit, the kit he carried everywhere, the kit he maintained with the obsessive care of a man who'd once lost a patient because a seal had cracked on a sterilization pack. He collected the sample, held the swab up to the corridor light. The residue was cold. That was the thing that snagged him. Everything in the briefing packet said Ilithari bioluminescent material was warm. It was generated by living cells in active metabolism. Warm meant alive. Warm meant functional. This was cold. Cold like something shutting down. Cole sealed the swab, put it back in his kit. Closed the kit with the quiet click that Nate always said sounded like a man loading a weapon. He walked to the barracks. He didn't tell anyone, not yet. He lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling and thought about the way Valet Sirana's hand had tightened on that glass, the way her light had stuttered like a heart skipping beats, the way Doyen Caliph had leaned toward Ambassador Solier after the reception and said with perfect diplomatic smoothness that the crown heir was simply fatigued from travel. Cole had grown up on a fringe colony where people said just tired, right up until they didn't wake up. He knew what tired looked like. That wasn't it. He turned on his side, pulled his kit onto the bunk beside him, and pressed his thumb against the sealed swab compartment. The samples sat inside, cold and fading, and full of questions that nobody on the Ilithari side seemed willing to ask. Cole was not Ilithari. He was not diplomatic. He was a medic from a dust colony who had dirt under his fingernails and the stubborn, hardwired conviction that if a body was failing, you didn't watch, you moved, you did something, you did anything. He closed his eyes. Sleep didn't come for a long time. Lucy Pratt had the kind of face that looked permanently annoyed, even when she was happy, which was almost never. She ran the Terran Coalition's xenobiology lab aboard the Meridian Arc, a room the size of a storage closet, with equipment worth more than most starships, and she did not appreciate visitors. Cole was a visitor. "You took a biological sample from an alien diplomat," Lucy said, holding the swab between two gloved fingers like it might bite her. "Without authorization, without containment protocol, without telling anyone." "I used a sterile swab." "Oh, wonderful. A sterile swab. That changes everything. That makes this not a diplomatic crime." "Can you run it?" Lucy stared at him. She had known Cole for 2 years, long enough to understand that the quiet ones were always the most trouble. He stood in her lab, with his hands at his sides, and his expression set to the exact same flat calm he wore when someone was bleeding out, and he was deciding where to put his hands first. She ran it. The results came back in 40 minutes. Lucy didn't speak for the first 10 of those minutes. She just stared at her screen, scrolling through cellular analysis data, her face losing color in stages, like someone slowly turning down a dial. "This is royal cast Ilithari tissue," she said. "I know. The cellular structure is collapsing. Apoptosis, programmed cell death, but not the normal kind. This is cascading. Every cell that dies triggers the cells around it to die. It's like dominoes, Cole. Whoever this came from. She stopped, looked at him. The princess. He didn't have to. Lucy pulled up a second database. Declassified Illithari medical texts, acquired through the kind of back-channel intelligence work that nobody talked about at diplomatic receptions. She cross-referenced, found it. Sevethal, she said. The words sat in the lab like a stone dropped in still water. Degenerative cellular collapse. Affects Illithari royal caste, exposed to specific deep space radiation. It's rare. It's old. They've known about it for 10,000 years. Cure? If they had one, I wouldn't be reading about it in a medical archive marked terminal conditions. Lucy leaned back in her chair. She's dying, Cole. Weeks. Maybe a month if she's strong. And based on these numbers, she's been burning through her reserves for a while already. The lab hummed. Somewhere above them, the station's recycling system pushed air through vents that needed cleaning. Cole stood very still. How does it kill her? Her cells forget how to live. That's the simplest way to say it. Illithari biology is elegant. Their cells are precise, specialized, beautiful in the way a crystal is beautiful. But crystals shatter. Their cellular repair mechanisms are delicate. When Sevethal starts, the repair systems fail first, and then everything they were holding together fails after. And human cells? Lucy blinked. What about human cells? How do they repair? She looked at him the way she looked at lab samples that did something unexpected, with sudden, sharp attention. Human cellular repair is nothing like Illithari repair. Ours is ugly, aggressive, brute force. We scar, we inflame, we throw resources at damage like we're putting out a fire with a fire hose. Our stem cells are regenerative to a degree that most species in the Galactic Index find frankly disturbing. We don't heal pretty, but we heal. Could that help her? The question hung in the recycled air. Lucy opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. In theory, she said, and her voice had changed, quieter, slower, the voice she used when she was thinking out loud and didn't want to be held to whatever came out. In theory, human undifferentiated stem cells bonded to a compatible energy carrier could stabilize Illithari's cellular collapse. The human cells wouldn't replace her biology. They'd scaffold it, hold the structure together while her own system remembers how to function. Do it, Cole, do it. The donation isn't blood. Lucy's voice went flat, professional, the tone she used when she was about to say something that would hurt. It's not marrow, it's not tissue. The extraction process would strip the donor's regenerative capacity, your healing factor, the thing that makes your cells aggressive and stubborn and human. But you'd become fragile, breakable. A cut that heals in 3 days now would take 3 weeks. A fractured bone that knits in 6 weeks would take 6 months. You'd age faster, bruise easier, catch every infection that looked at you sideways, and it would be permanent. Cole said nothing for a long time. Long enough that Lucy started to think he was actually considering the cost, weighing it, maybe even deciding against it. He was thinking about a colony floor, dust in the air, a woman lying on a cot with a treatable infection, and no medicine because the supply ship was 2 weeks late, and pride had kept the colony from asking the neighboring settlement for help. He was thinking about the sound she made when she stopped breathing. Not dramatic, just a small sound, like a door closing in another room. Prep the procedure, he said. The Illithari will never allow it. Their cultural framework, biological contamination from a younger species, they'd rather let her die pure than let her live with human cells inside her. Then don't ask them. Lucy stared at him. He met her gaze with the steady, terrible patience of a man who had already made his decision and was now simply waiting for the world to catch up. She didn't argue. She'd known him long enough to know what that look meant. That evening, the station's lighting shifted to night cycle, and the corridors went quiet. Cole walked his patrol route. He shouldn't have been anywhere near the Elithari wing. He was there anyway. He found Valith in the corridor junction between the diplomatic quarters and the observation gallery. She was leaning against the wall. The same wall, maybe the same spot. And her light was bad. Not flickering anymore. Dimming. The glow that had filled her skin at the reception was retreating, pulling inward, like a fire shrinking to coals. She heard his footsteps and straightened. The effort it cost her showed in her shoulders, in the half-second delay between deciding to stand and her body obeying. "You again," she said. Her voice was cool, controlled, the voice of someone holding themselves together through sheer, exhausting will, the one who stares. "You're about to fall down," Cole said. "I am not." She swayed. A small thing, a shift of weight that on a healthy person would mean nothing, but on her it meant her legs were forgetting how to lock. Cole caught her arm. His hand closed around her forearm, and he felt her skin, cool, almost cold, where every briefing document said it should be warm. "Let go of me." He didn't. Not until her weight settled, not until her balance returned, or whatever version of balance she could manage. Not until the flicker in her skin steadied into something that wouldn't go dark in the next 30 seconds. Then he let go, stepped back, gave her the space her pride needed. Valith looked at him. Her eyes were the same glacial pale, but up close he could see something in them that hadn't been there at the reception. Not fear. Worse. The quiet arithmetic of someone counting their remaining days and running out of numbers. She said nothing. She turned and walked back toward the Elithari quarters, and her light dimmed with every step. And Cole watched her go, and felt the swab compartment in his field kit press against his hip, like a promise he hadn't made yet, but was going to. He went back to the barracks. Nate was awake, sitting on his bunk, cleaning a sidearm he'd already cleaned twice. "You look like you're about to do something stupid," Nate said. Cole sat down, pulled his kit onto his lap, ran his thumb along the seal. "Probably," he said. Ambassador Solier listened to the entire briefing without interrupting. That was his talent, the ability to absorb information the way a sponge absorbs water, quietly and completely, until he was ready to wring it out in whatever shape served him best. Lucy laid out the science. Cole stood against the wall with his arms crossed and let her talk, because Lucy could explain cellular biology to diplomats without making them feel stupid, and Cole could not. She used words like scaffold and stabilization matrix and regenerative transfer. She showed data on her tablet. She was thorough and precise, and she only looked at Cole once, when she described the cost to the donor, and her eyes asked him one more time if he was sure. He didn't blink. Solier leaned back in his chair when she finished. He was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Cole counted. And then the political calculations behind his eyes finished running. "If we save the Ilthari heir," Solier said, "the alliance is guaranteed. Trade access, military cooperation, a generation of partnership, minimum." He looked at Cole. "And you're volunteering?" "Yes." "You understand what you'd be giving up?" Lucy explained it. "I need to hear you say it." "I'd lose my regenerative capacity, permanent. I'd heal slow, break easy, and age faster than baseline." "I understand." Solier studied him the way he studied trade proposals, looking for the hidden cost, the angle, the thing that wasn't being said. He didn't find one. Cole wasn't complicated enough to hide anything. "I'll make the formal offer to Doyen Caliph," Solier said. The meeting with Caliph was held in the station's main conference room, a space designed by architects who believed that diplomacy worked better with good lighting and uncomfortable chairs. Solier presented the proposal with the polished care of a man who sold ideas for a living. He spoke about partnership, shared futures, the gift of human science, offered in the spirit of alliance. Caliph listened. His glow was steady, strong, the deep blue of a healthy Illithari, in full command of his biology. He sat very still. His advisors sat behind him, equally still, their light pulsing in slow synchronized patterns that Cole suspected was some kind of cultural signal he wasn't meant to read. When Solier finished, Caliph spoke. No. One word, delivered with a courtesy so complete it was almost warm. He expressed admiration for human ingenuity. He noted the generosity of the proposed sacrifice, and he declined it, absolutely. The reasons came wrapped in diplomatic language, but Cole heard them clearly enough. Human biological material inside a royal Illithari body was contamination. It would alter Valith at a cellular level, make her something that was not fully Illithari. Her claim to the throne would be challenged, her legitimacy questioned. Her children, if she lived to have them, would carry the mark of another species in their blood. Caliph would rather watch his niece die clean than let her live changed. He said this with love. That was the thing that made Cole's jaw tighten until his teeth ached. Caliph wasn't a villain. He was an uncle who believed, with 10,000 years of cultural certainty behind him, that purity was more important than survival, that dying whole was better than living as something new. Solier accepted the refusal with grace. He was a diplomat. He'd lost rounds before. He would regroup, find another angle, try again. Cole didn't have that kind of time. Neither did Valith. It took him 2 days to find a way to speak with her directly. 2 days of shift rotations, patrol schedules, maintenance access codes that Nate acquired through means that Cole deliberately didn't ask about. 2 days of watching the Illithari delegation move through the station corridors with their lights blazing while their princess dimmed behind closed doors. He found her in the observation gallery, alone, sitting in front of the wide viewport, with her hands in her lap and her glows so faint that from across the room she looked almost human, just a tall, pale woman staring at stars. She heard him come in, didn't turn. "You're the medic," she said. "The one who grabbed my arm." "Cole Beckett. I didn't ask for your name. Now you have it anyway." Her eyes were tired. Not the diplomatic mask she wore in public. Not the regal composure that kept her standing when her cells were eating themselves alive. Just tired. The bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had been dying in private for weeks and was running out of energy to pretend otherwise. "Your ambassador made an offer to my uncle," she said. "Some kind of crude medical intervention. It was refused." "It wasn't crude, and you should know what it actually was before you accept the refusal." Her chin lifted. Even dying, she had the posture of someone who'd been taught to look down at the universe from a great height. "My uncle speaks for the Dominion. Your uncle is letting you die." The words landed in the observation gallery like a grenade in a library. Valith's expression didn't change. She'd been trained for this, trained to absorb shocks without showing the cracks. But her light stuttered. One hard flicker across her collarbone. There and gone. Cole told her everything. The science, the transfer, the scaffolding. He told her what human cells could do for her dying biology. Not replace it, but hold it, steady it, give it something to grip while it remembered how to sustain itself. He told her it worked. He told her it was real. And he told her what it would cost him. He didn't dress it up. He didn't make it sound noble or brave. He described it the way he'd describe a field amputation. Here's what happens. Here's what you lose. Here's what you keep. Valith was quiet for a long time after he finished. The stars turned slowly beyond the viewport. Her glow pulsed, weak, unsteady, the rhythm of a heart that was forgetting its beat. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why would you do this? Your species barely registers on our developmental index. We've existed for millennia before your kind learned to make fire. You owe me nothing. You owe my people nothing. So why?" Cole looked at her. He thought about the colony, the dust, the woman on the cot, the supply ship that came 2 weeks late with medicine for a patient who'd been dead for 10 days. He thought about every time someone had died because help existed, but pride or distance or protocol kept it locked in a cabinet while a body went cold. "Because I can," he said, "and because someone should." Valith stared at him. Her light flickered again. She turned back to the viewport, and Cole watched her reflection in the glass. The faint glow of her, the dark behind it, the stars beyond both. "My uncle will not permit it." "I'm not asking your uncle. I'm asking you. If this works, my people will never forgive you. You would be the human who contaminated the royal line. History would not remember you kindly. Good thing I'm not doing it for history." She pressed her fingers against the viewport glass. Her light pooled there, faint, the warmth almost gone from it. "I'll speak with Caliph," she said. She didn't tell Cole what happened behind those doors. He didn't ask. But 40 minutes later, an attendant came to the security barracks with a formal message stamped with the Crown Heir's personal seal. Valith Sarana consented to the procedure. Cole read the message once, folded it, put it in his kit next to the sealed swab he'd taken from the corridor wall 3 days ago. Nate watched him from across the barracks. "So you're really doing this?" "Yeah." "You know you're an idiot." "Yeah." "You want me to talk you out of it?" Cole closed his kit, looked up at Nate. Would it work? It was the sigh of a man who had known the answer before he asked the question, and had asked it anyway, because that's what friends did. They gave you one last door to walk through before you walked through the other one. "No," Nate said. "It wouldn't." That night, Cole sat in the medical bay while Lucy prepped equipment around him. The room was cold and bright, and smelled like sterilization fluid. Valith arrived alone. She'd left her attendants behind. She wore no diplomatic gown, no royal markers, just a simple Ilithari shift that hung from her shoulders like a whisper. Her light was barely there, a ghost of what it had been. She sat across from him. Neither spoke for a long time. Cole checked his field kit. Old habit. Steady hands. "If this works," Valith said quietly, "my people will never forgive you." His fingers moved across the instruments, opening, checking, closing, the small rituals that kept his hands from shaking. "Good thing I'm not doing it for them," he said. The procedure started at 0600 station time. Lucy had cleared the medical bay of everything that wasn't essential, which meant the room was mostly machines and silence, and the sound of 2 people, breathing at different rhythms. Cole lay on the primary table. Valith lay on the secondary, 3 feet to his left, close enough that if he turned his head, he could see the weak pulse of light beneath her skin. He didn't turn his head. He stared at the ceiling, and counted the tiles, because counting was something his body knew how to do without thinking, and he needed his thinking for other things. Lucy worked between them like a woman defusing a bomb, calm hands, tight jaw, eyes that never stopped moving between readouts. She'd run simulations all night. The math worked. The biology worked. The risk was in the execution. And the execution was happening now. And there was no simulation for the sound a human body makes when you start pulling out the thing that keeps it strong. The extraction began. It wasn't like giving blood. Blood was a river you could tap without the river noticing. This was different. The process reached deeper, into marrow, into the stem cells that lived in the quiet places of the body, into the regenerative engine that had been running since Cole was a cluster of cells in his mother's womb. It found those cells, and it asked them to leave. and because human biology was built on the principle of giving everything it had to the fight, the cells answered. Cole felt it as warmth, a strange, slow pull, like someone had opened a drain at the bottom of a bathtub he didn't know he was sitting in. Just a sensation of something leaving, something flowing outward through channels that hadn't existed until Lucy's machines built them. Hour 1. His vitals held steady. Lucy watched the numbers and said nothing. Hour 2. The extracted material, a golden thick substance that looked nothing like blood and everything like liquid sunlight, traveled through the transfer line toward Valeth. Her body received it the way dry ground receives rain. Slow, careful, then desperate. Valeth gasped, a small sound, private, the kind of noise a person makes when they've been holding their breath for weeks, and something finally cracks the seal. Her hands gripped the table edges. Her light, that dying, stuttering glow, shuddered. Lucy adjusted the transfer rate. Slower, steadier. Easy, she murmured, and Cole wasn't sure which of them she was talking to. Hour 4. Valeth's cells began to stabilize. Lucy saw it on the monitor first. The cascading apoptosis slowing, the cellular death rate dropping, the dying dominoes pausing mid-fall as something new slid underneath them and held. The human scaffolding was catching. Cole's cells, stripped of their home and repurposed for a body they'd never been designed for, were doing what human cells always did. They fought. Ugly, stubborn, graceless. They wedged themselves into the gaps in Valeth's failing biology, and they held on with the brute persistence of a species that had survived ice ages and plagues and its own relentless talent for self-destruction. They didn't understand Illithari's cellular architecture. They didn't need to. They just needed to hold. Valeth's light flickered. Not the sick stutter from before. A pulse, unsteady, searching, like a signal trying to find its frequency. Then another, stronger. Cole felt the cost begin. It came as tiredness first. Not the tiredness of a long shift or a bad night. A deeper thing. A tiredness in the architecture, in the framework that held his body's systems together. His cells were still producing, still regenerating, still fighting. But the engine that drove them was losing fuel. Each unit of regenerative material that left him was a unit that would never come back. He could feel the math of it in his bones, a quiet subtraction that would never stop. Hour 7. Valeth was glowing, faintly, unevenly, but glowing, a real sustained light that pulsed with something that wasn't quite the cool blue of pure Illithari bioluminescence. It was warmer, a warmth that hadn't been there before, a golden undertone running beneath the blue like a river beneath ice. Human warmth, his warmth, translated into light, living in her skin. Lucy stared at the readings and pressed her lips together, in the thin, tight expression of a scientist watching something impossible behave exactly as her equations predicted. Cole's vitals dipped, not gently. The monitor screamed, a sharp electronic wail that filled the medical bay and made Lucy's hands stop moving for one terrible second. His heart rate dropped. His blood pressure followed. The regenerative markers on his chart, which had been declining steadily for 9 hours, fell off a cliff. Lucy's hand went to the emergency stop. Cole, keep going. His voice was quiet, hoarse. It didn't sound brave or dramatic. It sounded like a man doing math, calculating what Valeth's cells still needed, measuring it against what he had left, and finding that the answer wasn't 0 yet. Your regenerative index is at 14%. If it drops below 10, how much does she need? Lucy looked at Valeth's readings, looked at Cole's. Her face was a war between science and something older than science. The part of a doctor that wants to save every patient, and the part that knows sometimes saving one means losing another. 2 more hours, she said. Maybe 90 minutes if her uptake rate holds. Then keep going. Outside the medical bay, Nate stood with his back against the door. He'd been there for 9 hours. He hadn't moved. He hadn't paced. He hadn't done any of the things a worried man does when his friend is on the other side of a wall, doing something that can't be undone. He heard the monitor scream. He heard it stop. He heard the low murmur of voices. Lucy's, tight and clinical, and Cole's, steady the way a bridge is steady when it's carrying more weight than it was built for. Nate pressed his shoulders against the door and locked his jaw and stayed exactly where he was, because that was the only thing he could do for Cole right now. Stand post, hold the door, be the wall between the procedure and everything outside it. He was good at being a wall. It was his best thing. Hour 11. It was done. Lucy disconnected the transfer line with hands that had started shaking 10 minutes ago and hadn't stopped. She ran final diagnostics on both patients. She checked numbers she'd already checked. She checked them again. Cole lay on the table and breathed. His eyes were open, that something behind them had changed. A quietness, a diminishment, like a furnace that had been burning high for 31 years and had just been banked down to embers. He was alive. He was whole. Everything that made him Cole Beckett was still there. The memories, the instincts, the medic's hands, the colony kid's stubborn, hardwired need to help. But the engine that had powered all of it was running on fumes now. He could feel it the way you feel a missing tooth, not as pain, but as absence. A space where something used to be. He turned his head. Valith sat up on the secondary table. Light moved under her skin in slow, steady waves. Strong, sustained, alive. The blue was still there, still Illithari, still ancient and elegant and hers. But running through it like gold thread through silk was something new, something warm, something that pulsed with the blunt, stubborn rhythm of a human heart. She looked at him. She saw the cost. It was in his face, in the hollows under his eyes that hadn't been there 11 hours ago, in the way his hands reached for his field kit on the side table and fumbled the clasp. Hands that had never fumbled anything. Hands that had stitched wounds in dust storms and held pressure on arterial bleeds and never once lost their grip. They shook now. Just slightly. Just enough. The door opened. Doyen Kalith entered the medical bay with 2 attendants behind him. He stopped 3 steps inside the room and looked at his niece. She glowed, warm and strange and alive. The silence between them was an entire history. 10,000 years of what the Illithari were, and what Valith now was, and the distance between those two things. Kalith's light pulsed once, a deep, slow blue. He said nothing. His attendants said nothing. The room held its breath. Valith held her uncle's gaze. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She was alive. That was her answer. Kalith turned and left. The door closed behind him with a sound like a sentence ending. He was still lying on the table, still breathing in that careful, measured way, still holding his field kit against his chest with hands that trembled. She reached over, touched his hand. Her glow pulsed where their skin met. Warm, that new warmth. Gold and blue, and something else that neither of their species had a word for yet. Cole looked at the light. A small expression crossed his face. Not quite a smile. Close enough. "Suits you," he said. His voice was barely there. 3 months passed. The galaxy did what the galaxy always did. It kept moving, kept spinning its slow and different wheel, and the people inside it either held on or didn't. Cole held on. He was stationed at a rear echelon outpost on the edge of Terran space, a supply depot that handled inventory logistics and medical restocking for the forward fleets. It was the kind of post they gave soldiers who could still serve, but couldn't serve the way they used to. Quiet work, safe work, the kind of work that let a man heal. Except Cole didn't heal, not like before. He'd fractured his wrist during a cargo transfer 6 weeks ago. A standard injury. He'd braced against a shifting crate. The angle was wrong, and the bone cracked with a sound he'd heard 100 times from other people, and never once from himself. Before the procedure, a fracture like that would have knit in 4 to 6 weeks. Clean. Complete. His cells rushing to the damaged site with the aggressive efficiency that had made human biology the galactic standard for regenerative stubbornness. 6 weeks later, the fracture was still healing. Slow. Patient. Like his body had forgotten the urgency it used to carry, and replaced it with something cautious and careful and old. He wore a stabilizer on the wrist. He hated it. Not because it hurt. It didn't, mostly. But because it was a reminder. Every morning he strapped it on. And every morning his fingers fumbled the clasp in a way they never used to. And every morning he remembered what that fumble cost and what it bought. The Terran Coalition had turned the story into a recruitment poster. Not literally. Solier was too smart for that. But the narrative had spread through human space with the inevitable momentum of a good story meeting an eager audience. A human soldier saves an alien princess, gives part of himself so she can live. The alliance with the Illithari Dominion was now the centerpiece of Terran foreign policy, and Cole Beckett was the name attached to it, whether he wanted to be or not. He didn't want to be. Nate had been reassigned to the same outpost, which was either a coincidence or the kind of quiet, bureaucratic favor that someone in Solier's office had arranged, because they understood that Cole Beckett was a man who needed a wall at his back, and Nate Harlow had been that wall for years. Nate didn't treat him differently. That was the gift. He didn't slow down when they walked together, didn't offer to carry things, didn't ask how the wrist was healing. He treated Cole exactly the same as before, which meant he insulted his cooking, criticized his taste in music, and complained loudly about the outpost's supply of protein rations. What Nate did do, quietly, without discussion, was position himself between Cole and any physical situation that might test the body Cole no longer had. He moved cargo crates that were technically Cole's responsibility. He took the patrol shifts that required climbing. He did it the way a good soldier does everything, efficiently, without drawing attention, without needing to be thanked. Cole noticed. He didn't say anything. Some things lived better in silence. The communications from Valeth started formal. Official diplomatic correspondence, stamped with the crown seal of the Illithari Dominion, written in the structured syntax of interspecies treaty language. She thanked the Terran Coalition for its cooperation. She acknowledged the sacrifice of Corporal Cole Beckett. She expressed the Dominion's commitment to the continued partnership between their peoples. Cole read the first message 3 times. Not because the words were complicated, they were simple, diplomatic, hollow in the way all official language was hollow. He read it 3 times, because somewhere between the formal phrases and treaty references, buried in a subordinate clause that a diplomat would read as routine and a medic would read as a vital sign, Valeth had written, "The warmth persists." 3 words, loaded, dropped without explanation. He wrote back. It took him 2 hours to write 4 sentences. He wasn't a man who knew how to put things on paper. His hands were built for gauze and sutures, not words. But he wrote, and the writing was short and plain and true, the way everything about Cole was short and plain and true. The second message from Valeth came a week later. The treaty language was still there, but thinner, like paint wearing away to show the wood beneath. She wrote about the Dominion, the political fracture his sacrifice had caused. Half the Illithari court saw her survival as proof of the alliance's value, and the other half saw her altered light as proof of contamination. Caliph had stepped down as regent. The transition had been difficult. She didn't say how. She wrote, "I glow differently now. The court physicians cannot explain the warmth. I have stopped asking them to." Cole wrote back. 3 sentences this time. One of them was about the weather on the outpost, which was always the same because the outpost didn't have weather. He sent it anyway. By the 3rd month, the messages had stopped pretending to be diplomatic correspondence. Short, unpolished, written by 2 people who had shared something that language wasn't built to carry, and were trying anyway. On a Tuesday that was identical to every other Tuesday on the outpost, Nate found Cole on the observation deck. It was late, station night cycle, the corridors dimmed, the viewport showing the slow rotation of stars that didn't care about alliances or sacrifices or the small, stubborn decisions of small, stubborn species. Cole stood at the glass, with his stabilized wrist resting against the viewport rail. He was watching nothing. He was watching everything. Nate stood beside him, didn't speak for a while. The silence between them was comfortable in the way that only long friendships produce. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled, because both people know it's full already. "Do you regret it?" Nate asked. Cole took a long time to answer, long enough that the stars moved, long enough that Nate started to think he wasn't going to answer at all, which would have been fine because sometimes the answer was in the silence. "I'm still here," Cole said. Nate sat with that, turned it over, decided it was enough. 2 weeks later, the Illithari Dominion held a galactic summit. 18 species attended. It was broadcast across every civilized system, and some uncivilized ones too, because politics was entertainment, and entertainment was politics, and the galaxy had never been good at telling the difference. Thalith addressed the assembly. She stood at the center of a stage designed to amplify Illithari bioluminescence, and the light that moved beneath her skin filled the space with something that made the assembled delegates stop breathing. Blue and gold, ancient and new, the cool precision of 10,000 years of Illithari biology, threaded with a warmth that had no name in their language because it had never existed before. She spoke about strength. Not the strength of armies, or technology, or the ability to project force across star systems. She spoke about a different kind. The willingness to become less, so someone else could become more. The choice to give away the thing that makes you what you are, because someone else needs it to survive. She did not name Cole. She didn't say human. She didn't point to a species, or a soldier, or a specific act. She spoke in abstractions, and every delegate in the room understood she was speaking about something concrete, and the gap between the abstraction and the reality was where the meaning lived. Cole watched the broadcast from the outpost medical bay. He was there because the wrist needed its weekly scan, and Lucy, who had transferred to the same outpost in a move that she described as purely logistical, and that everyone understood was not, was running the scanner with one eye on his bone density readings and one eye on the screen. Valeth's voice filled the medical bay. Her light filled the screen. The warm gold woven through the blue pulsed with a rhythm that Lucy recognized. She'd mapped it during the transfer, counted its beats, measured its frequency. It was Cole's rhythm, his regenerative pulse, translated into light, living in an alien body 10,000 light-years away. Lucy looked at Cole. He was watching the screen with an expression she couldn't read and didn't try to. Some things were private, even when they were broadcast to 18 species. The summit ended. The broadcast cut to diplomatic commentary. Lucy turned it off. "Your bone density is still below baseline," she said, because she was Lucy, and clinical facts were how she expressed concern. "The fracture is healing, slowly. I know. You'll need to be careful with it, probably always. I know." She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she went back to her charts. That night, alone in his quarters, Cole opened his field kit. He did it every night, the same ritual, the same order. Open the kit, check each instrument, confirm the seals, test the sterilization indicators, close the kit. His hands were steady. They shook sometimes now, when he was tired, when the cold got into the wrist, when his body reminded him of the math it was still doing. But tonight they were steady. Not because the procedure had left him undiminished, because some things didn't need regeneration. Some things were built on repetition and care, and the decision to keep doing them regardless. He closed the kit. The clasp clicked shut. That sound Nate always said was like a man loading a weapon. Cole stood, stretched, felt the wrist protest, and ignored it the way he'd been ignoring things his body told him for 3 months. Not recklessly, but with the patient, informed stubbornness of a man who knew his limits and chose to live right up against them. He turned off the light, went to bed. Somewhere across the galaxy, in a palace older than human civilization, Valeth Sirana stood at a window and glowed. Blue and gold, old and new, her and not entirely her. The warmth persisted. She pressed her fingertips against the glass, and the light pooled there, faint, warm, steady. And she thought about a medic on a supply depot who wrote bad letters and healed slow and had hands that used to never shake. The stars turned. The cost remained. And in a small outpost on the edge of Terran space, a man with a cracked wrist and a well-maintained field kit got up in the morning and went back to work. Because that was what humans did. They got up, they went on, they carried what they carried, and they didn't put it down. Not ever.